Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about religion, specifically new techno religions and political ideologies that are beginning to not just emerge, but gain traction in culture, in politics, in technological development, in the economy, and kind of what this signals about where we're going, not just as a civilization, but as a human species. I think one thing I've observed is that we all, at least all of us who've gone through college, went through the educational experience and didn't actually learn about the ideas that gave shape to the world we live in today, or at least not explicitly. So, give you a great example, right? So, I've talked a lot about feminism on this channel, and I've talked about my own journey out of feminism, and that how up until very recently, I was as crazy of a leftist as any of the current leftists you see on social media. And in the past couple of years, I've slowly shifted, moving more and more center and arguably closer to the right. But all of the things I believed as a feminist and as a Democrat came from somewhere. And a lot of that you'll probably hear it referenced as, cultural Marxism, for example, or, things like critical race theory. All of these ideas emerged and manifested as a result of theories and ideas that were written down by a variety of people, college academics, writers, Marx, I think, was a publisher. All sorts of different ideas have coalesced to give shape to the world we live in today. And I learned and I professed and I practiced feminist ideals, but I've never actually read like Betty Friedan. I didn't even know who Gloria Steinem was until, I started diving deeper and deeper into understanding these actual thoughts that underpinned the feminist ideology that I was living. I've never read those works. I have no idea what they actually believe. Even Marx, in college, I never read Marx. So I learned I learned cultural Marxism. I adopted that as a political ideology, but I never consciously or rationally learned it, evaluated it, studied it, critiqued it, and came to that conclusion organically on my own. So thoughts come from somewhere. Historically, it's been religion, right? And then after the Protestant Reformation and during the Enlightenment, you had rational philosophers challenging the hegemony of the Christian church. And then obviously in the 20th century, you had cultural Marxists talking about like oppressive structures and postmodernism and that kind of stuff. So I share all this because all of these thoughts and ideas have created the world we live in today. Most of us, at least if you went to a normal college, you didn't encounter or study any of these topics. You may have I suspect that most people have probably heard of Plato. They've heard of Socrates, right? But they have no idea what these people actually believed and how important those ideas were. Aristotle, for example, how all of these ideas, morphed into, a Judeo-Christian tradition, how all of that coalesced into capitalism and the government we, have here in democracy and things we live here in the United States, and then how communism and Marxism have challenged and undermined that. Like, we just don't understand how all of these things came to be. And so that's why I want to talk about ideological movements and politics and religion, specifically new ideas coming out of Silicon Valley, because just like in the past, just like with Christianity, just like with the Enlightenment, we are living in a new philosophical era shaped in large part by computers and technology that is going to give way to new beliefs and ideals about how humans should exist. And I think this is quite fundamental to our core. It's not just, love your neighbor as yourself and do good for others and treat others how you want to be treated. It's not like that. It's, getting to a point, I think, where humans are trying to transcend the limits of nature, the limits of biology, and the limits of ourselves and become gods in our own right. And yes, I will completely confess I am biased. I come from a Christian background. So my understanding of the world has largely been shaped like that. And one of my takeaways from important stories that come out of the Old Testament is that God punished Adam and Eve. God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. God, imposed a flood on the world to wipe out, humanity except for Noah and his menagerie of animals. In large part because the ego of man had gotten so big that man tried to become equivalent to God. So I had always learned, the Adam and Eve story and the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. I had always learned, well, Eve disobeyed God. And that is true to some extent. God said, do not eat of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And she did. But more importantly, it's why, why you shouldn't eat from that specific tree. And the by eating from the tree and by gaining knowledge of good and evil, Adam and Eve effectively became more equal to God. They were no longer just his creation, they were more equivalent to him, if that makes sense. And so you see this theme come up time and time again in the Old Testament. And that's kind of led me to my personal conclusion that the folly of man and the existential peril we face is trying to become more like God. So I think there's a benefit to accepting the limits biology and nature have imposed on ourselves. And I don't know. I think we're towing a very fine line when it comes to the creation of artificial intelligence, because it is not only just the creation of a new technology, it's the creation of a new cognitive form of inorganic life, and combined with transhumanism and combined with these movements out of Silicon Valley espousing the ideas that you can transcend the limits of your biology, this new technology could create a new form of life, and then we will become the gods or the creators of that life, and again bringing us on par with God. So you might come from a different background, you might not have a faith at all, and that's totally fine. But that's kind of like the perspective of which I see the world, and I think we should all strive to be the best versions of ourselves, of course. But I think there are important limits that, we should acknowledge and we should be respectful of, and we should check our egos and make sure that we're not trying to push the limits where they're not intended to be pushed. So I want to dive into a piece that was in the New York Times recently, and then also play a clip from an interview that one of Silicon Valley's most famous venture capitalists also did with the New York Times. So this is titled "The Rise of Silicon Valley's Techno Religion." And it's all about this group called The Rationalists, who's a community focused on the risks of artificial intelligence. And they regularly gather at this building and treat it kind of like a church, but they're also kind of more philosophy oriented. So a church that's not a church. And they talk about these things. So this building right here, this is called Lighthaven, and it's the de facto headquarters of a group that calls itself the Rationalists. The group has many interests involving mathematics, genetics, and philosophy. One of its overriding beliefs is that artificial intelligence can deliver a better life if it doesn't destroy humanity first. And the Rationalists believe it is up to the people building AI to ensure that it is a force for the greater good. So here within this description, you kind of get what I was saying about talking about in the beginning. Like, it's not just this building of a new technology. There's a whole like philosophical underpinning to it. And these groups have obviously different interests, but they believe an artificial intelligence is almost like a savior complex, and you get that here, that artificial intelligence can deliver a better life if it doesn't destroy humanity first. So there's like a salvation element to it, which is also present in Christianity, right? The need that humans are imperfect as we are, and that we're constantly striving to improve the state of our existence. And this is the ethos of, the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and everything that has progressed in science and technology since then. This idea that progression, that we need to progress and move forward. And an interesting juxtaposition of this, and this is something I heard somewhere, I read somewhere, I can't remember where exactly, but this idea, the Fourth Turning. I'm reading the Fourth Turning right now as well. And there's a chapter that talks about this in the beginning, but how historically, pre-industrial civilizations really oriented their lives, their societies, their religious practices around seasons and cycles, and the lunar calendar and the zodiac, and how everything was cyclical. So there wasn't this linear progression of life and time and the imperative to progress through it, so always get better and better and better and better. There's a cyclical nature to it. So there was life, it lived, it died, it was reborn, and over and over and over again. And I think people understood that and operated in a very cyclical world, whereas today we operate in a very linear world, and that linear world is always increasing. We always have to get better. And so I think that is important too, because that is incumbent in the last sentence here. And the rationalists believe it is up to the people building AI to ensure there's a force for the greater good. So again, this idea that we don't really have a place in society, we don't have a purpose, that there's something we're striving towards, there's something we're working towards, and we haven't quite arrived there yet. And we have to do whatever it takes to get there. So I think one perspective, like the cyclical pre-industrial ancient perspective, is life is cyclical. Life is in sync with nature, because if you are ascribing to those cycles, you are one and part of nature. And the other is that you are above nature, you exist outside of nature, and that you're trying to progress towards some sort of ideal of perfect human existence, and you haven't quite gotten there yet. And so you're always striving for something more, and that leads to, I think, dissatisfaction and kind of all the maladies we're facing today in modern life. But that's why I think this is really important to talk about, because it's not just a technology, it's a religious movement that has emerged out of this. So it talks about some of the world's biggest names are behind it. So it talks about Anthropic's chief executive officer, Dario Amodei. He's someone who's affiliated with the Rationalists, but Elon Musk as well. And he talks about how Elon Musk met his former partner Grimes after she made a reference to the rationalist belief called Rocco's basilisk. And so this idea basically says that there's going to be the arrival of an all-powerful AI. So Peter Thiel, I think, refers to this more as like the Antichrist, and some people equate it to like a godlike being. So this powerful super intelligence. And the argument with this thought experiment is that once it arrives, it's going to punish everyone who knew about it and could have done something to help it come into existence quicker, but didn't. So I guess like a good comparison here to give you like a visualization is Aladdin and Genie. And Aladdin freed Genie from the bottle. And the argument here would be that once Genie came out, Genie would punish everyone in Aladdin's world for not working harder to find Genie and release him sooner. That's my understanding of this thought experiment. It's kind of a weird thought experiment. I don't know why you would think about that kind of thing. But anyways, that's something important to take into consideration, because it signals urgency. Like, people are racing towards this and making sure AI comes into existence as quickly as possible. So it says the rationalist community is tightly entwined with the effective altruism movement, which, if you're not familiar with that, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried was affiliated with that, and he'll come into play later on in this article, but you can associate effective altruism with him. And the idea behind this movement is that it aims to remake philanthropy by calculating how many people would benefit from each donation. It's a form of utilitarianism that aims to benefit not just people who are alive today, but all the people who will ever live. And so I think incumbent in these movements as well, so whether it's, super intelligence, whether it's effective altruism and philanthropy, it's this idea that your self no longer exists. And I think we have taken self and individualism too far in the political sense. But in the historical, like, Christian religious sense, like, self is incredibly important. Like, as a self, you are part of the church, but you are also an individual. You have free will and agency, and you can atone for your sins and accept God's love. And there's a relationship element. Like, you are in relation with God, you are in relationship with yourself, and you're in relationship with the church around you. But these movements, I think, eliminate all barriers. There's an essence of conformity here. Like, we are all part of this giant blob, and there is a utilitarian calculation here. It's, trying to do the best for people who who are more likely to succeed or, have the best outcome in the future. It's a very calculated way of looking at things. And the visual that comes to mind when I read this is I, Robot, when there's a scene in the movie where Will Smith, I think it was Will Smith and the Sonny the robot, and there's sorry if I spoil this for anyone and I'm misremembering it, but there was a scene where there was a car crash and it went into water, and Sonny had the choice between saving a girl or saving someone else, and like ran all these calculations to figure out who to save. And so that's kind of what I think of when I think of this. It's like you're looking at the world through a very calculated lens, and you're not taking into account individuality, which means you're not taking into account our humanity and what makes us unique and human, and the fact that we are flawed, and that isn't something to necessarily overcome. It's something to accept and work with, right? We're not perfect people. We're never going to be. But this idea that like of utilitarianism, I think it came up in the 19th century as a reaction to capitalism, and I think it's kind of making a headway again today with technology. And so this person here is an anthropologist who studied the rise of both rationalist and effective altruism. And she says they've built a well-funded ecosystem to spread, amplify, and validate their ideology. So this quote is important because it's not just a religious movement. It's not just a cult. The first thing that came to mind when I started reading this article was Scientology, right? Oh, these are just a bunch of weirdo Scientologists who read some books and now they're all living in this house together and doing this stuff. But the thing is that they're building an ecosystem, right? So I've identified three people, Sam Bankman-Fried, Dario Amodei, and Elon Musk, right? Those three people have significant or have had significant influence in the world we live in today. Whereas like the only Scientologists I could name are like Tom Cruise, right? Like celebrities who are important to some degree socially and culturally, but they're not important in how we live our day-to-day lives, right? Like Dario Amodei, for example, he came out in Axios a few months ago and talked about the white-collar bloodbath that's about to happen with, it's already happening with entry-level workers, and how like half of entry-level jobs are going to disappear in the next 1 to 5 years, right? Like that has a significant impact on your life and my life. Whether or not Tom Cruise does another Top Gun, like absolutely inconsequential. So I think that's why this is important, because it's not just ideas. It's not just tech nerds being tech nerds. Like they're building an entire ecosystem to spread these ideas and validate them and make sure that they're correct and they're in all sorts of different facets of our lives, right? They're not even just sequestered to Silicon Valley. The stuff they're doing is impacting our day-to-day lives. So I think that's important to consider. Okay. So the rationalist movement is a lifestyle as much as a set of ideas. The adherents have mixed their focus on AI with advice for how to live your life and manage your career. The community embraces unconventional ideas, including polyamory and genetics of intelligence, as well as effective altruism, which is also a lifestyle. And for aspirational AI developers, rationalist events have become essential networking opportunities. So this is also incredibly important because as it talks about, it's not like a religion. It's not something you just go to on Sundays or Wednesday evenings, right? It's like it's a fully integrated part of your life, but not even just that. It's an integrated part of your career. So if you're an ambitious person living in Silicon Valley, you need to join groups like this to be part of the club, because if you're not, you're going to be an outsider. And if you're an outsider, and this, harkens back to tribalism, but if you're not part of the tribe, like you're not going to progress along with the tribe as the tribe progresses, right? So I think everyone is trying to, hitch onto the coattails of certain groups, certain people, certain ideologies to see which one progresses and kind of wins this race. Like I said, we see time as very linear and like we're racing towards a progression of something. So that's what all this is about. It feels like it's a race. But the networking opportunities piece is important to us because it signals that people aren't just joining this because of what they believe necessarily, that there's a quid pro quo, like give and take aspect to it. So it says the rationalists emerged in the late 2000s when an online philosopher named Eliezer Yudkowsky wrote The Sequences, a collection of essays that taught people to re-examine the world through cold, careful thought. This often involved using statistics and probability to inform their decisions. Part tutorial, part entertainment, part mystic journey. Mr. Yudkowsky's essays became a manual for the rationalist movement. So I want to focus on the sentence here. This often involved using statistics and probability to inform their decisions. So one of the things you've probably heard other commentators talk about, or you might be aware of, is data has been described as the energy and the oil of the modern era, right? Like everything that exists today is a function of data. This is why, OpenAI and Meta and all these big tech companies have like stolen like ginormous amounts of data and books and human knowledge in order to train their AI agents. This is why they're racing towards building data centers to power these things. Data is at the core of everything, everything that's happening in Silicon Valley. Without data, there wouldn't be any artificial intelligence. And I think this is important because it signals a direction that the world is heading in. And this is how I've been feeling for a while. There's a book I have on my bookshelf I need to read called Surveillance Capitalism, by Shoshana something. She's a professor at Harvard. Thick book. But it's basically how we live in a capitalism, yes, but very much a surveillance capitalism state. And so how we're living in a world of where our behaviors are being programmed based on data. And you saw this with the rise of social media and all of the advertising platforms that underpin the internet today. Like there is tremendous value in collecting data, massive amounts of data, distilling it, making inferences from it. And now, because of artificial intelligence and the vast amount of data that's being collected, you can shape human decisions and behaviors to guarantee certain outcomes. And I think that's important because up until this point in time, well, maybe not up until this point in time, because you could argue like oppression and structural dynamics. But up until very recently, I think humans have been thought of in the sense of having free agency, or like we have sovereignty to make our decisions. And then I would say with the cultural Marxist stuff, you started to see oppression narratives and how the system and the patriarchy and all these like abstract externalities were to blame for wherever you were in your life. And now we're seeing, the rise of data and making decisions based on data. I think we've seen a deterioration of individual free will and individual agency over time. And we're all being kind of pushed into these different, whether it's a victim hierarchy on the oppression hierarchy, whether you're in a victim class or whether you're in a cohort for the purpose of, a consumer cohort for the purpose of selling something. I think data is being used to, shape how we behave without us even knowing it. And so that's why when I read this sentence stuck out at me, using statistics and probability to inform their decisions, because it's very cold, it's very impersonal, but it relies on data. You can't do statistics and you can't do probability without data. So I think we're increasingly living in a world that others are creating for us based on this premise that things need to be calculated and made into probabilities. And economics is a great example of this. You see, economics has been grossly reduced to a bunch of mathematical equations. And this is why I like the Austrian school a lot, because it talks about human behavior. Like, yes, there are certain things you can anticipate, you can predict, but at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And so by reducing humans to a bunch of data points and data points that you can calculate statistics and probability on, you eliminate free will and you eliminate their humanity. So this is another example of the reductionism that's kind of embedded in this new techno-religious philosophy. Okay, so there's been some criticism for these movements, obviously. So there's been complaints about eugenics, which should not come as a surprise. Eugenics has been around for a very long time, and this obviously makes sense. They want the best people to succeed. They want, it's very maximalist. We want to maximize, success of the human species, success, keep AI, making sure it gives us, the utopia we want, right? So this idea of maximalism, like, of course, you're going to have eugenics as part of that. You don't want anyone holding you back. And then obviously, like I said before, Sam Bankman-Fried was part of this community, and there's been a lot of reputation damage because of what he did with FTX. And so there's another person in here that they interviewed, Harvard chaplain, who says, what do cultish fundamentalist religions do? They get people to ignore their common sense about problems in the here and now in order to focus their attention on some fantastical future. And so this is why I think there's a greater push right now towards religion. I think people see the uncertainty of the future that is unfolding before our very eyes. And there's a push for more, I think, traditional things that people understand, people know, people are familiar with. So Christianity, you're seeing a resurgence with Gen Z in Christianity, and also other religions too. I'm using Christianity as an example, but you're also seeing resurgence and growth in, Islam and other religions. But then also you're seeing a growth in secular religion. So I would say the current political ideology of the left, if you want to call it wokeism, I don't know what the name per se of it is, but whatever the current Democratic Party is doing today, that is an example of a secular political ideology. And then, of course, this movement here, this rationalist movement, this is an example of a tech movement ideology. And so it says right here that it gets people to ignore their common sense. So we don't see what's in front of us. We can't think for ourselves. We have to. There's a lot of groupthink, and you're looking towards the future and the promise of a better future. You're not necessarily looking at how life is unfolding right now before your very eyes. Okay, so this is a guy who is a longtime Bay Area rationalist who served as a master of ceremonies for some event. And he talks about how we face a number of threats our ancestors couldn't imagine. So nuclear war, bioengineered pandemics, artificial intelligence. And he says, if we fail, and there's every chance we might, 100% of the children will die, so will everyone else. So this is a very absolutist way of thinking. It's like, they would rather take aggressive action now towards building AI to save at least 1 or 2% of the human race, or get 1 or 2% of people ahead, versus letting 100% of people die. And I don't know that that's necessarily how this is going to play out. I think that's a very absolutist way of thinking. And if you approach it like that, you're going to prefer and advance certain groups of people over others. So there's, I would say, an accepted level of suffering within these ideologies. So my understanding of effective altruism, it's like, okay, we'll push money, we'll put philanthropy, we'll help get, X% of people ahead. And this might lead to the loss of for some people, but that's okay because the outcome is better than the loss. So like it balances out. And FTX is a great example of this. So, Sam Bankman-Fried is an effective altruist. He said, okay, my handling of this money and the future it could produce as a result of it is better than the people I'm effectively running a Ponzi scheme on. So he didn't care about the people who lost their life savings in the collapse of FTX. He didn't care what that did. He cared about the future. And so people like that will continue to do things that hurt people in the present in order to push forward an ideal of a future that isn't even guaranteed, and it's very absolutist in nature. And then again, it talks about how the building that they use, this Light Haven building, was purchased with money from two of the community's biggest funders, Mr. Bankman-Fried. So you can kind of see where this comes from. And this piece here kind of gets it back to the job prospects. So talks about how this can be an on-ramp at AI companies. So these effective altruists and these rationalists are very much integrated within top tech companies. So you hear people on the right critiquing tech companies as being woke. I don't know that they're woke per se, at least not in the cultural political context that is being proliferated on especially like conservative social media channels. I think it's more of this. I think it's more of a quasi-religious belief in what technology is supposed to do and how it's going to advance humanity and the human condition. But a lot of these people are integrated with these companies. So these tech companies are going to evolve in the vision that these people see fit, and it's going to follow these ideas. This is why ideas are so important. Okay, so that is this piece. This is about, rationalists. I also want to talk about another techno religion that has been in Silicon Valley for a period of time, and I think it's growing in prominence, and that is transhumanism. I just asked Google to give me a quick explainer of this. So this is transhumanism is an intellectual cultural movement that advocates using science and technology to fundamentally transform the human condition. Proponents aim to overcome limitations like disease, aging, and mortality by enhancing human intellectual, physical, and psychological capabilities. So some of the proponents of this are Nick Bostrom, Ray Kurzweil, Elon Musk, and their core tenets are to extend life, enhance humanity, evolve technologically, and it says here to improve the human species. I think, and other people have said this too, I think we're going to move towards a post-Homo sapiens quasi-human species. So whatever evolves now, we're going to see probably in our lifetime the evolution of a new species of Homo. And and I don't really know what that is, but I think it's going to be integrated with technology and have more advanced cognitive and physical capabilities than what we have now. So you're going to have a superhuman species that is going to emerge alongside superhuman computer intelligence. I think they're going to be integrated, and that's going to, they're going to emerge concurrently. And so I think this is important because transhumanism, again, it's a belief system that is manifesting in the world we live in today. You might be wondering, this is something, I think about all the time. It's like, how did we go from a world where, a few years ago, people were celebrating, the rights of gay people to get married with Obergefell and that decision. So we were talking about that. We were having debates about gay marriage to the point we're at now, where there is a group of people within this country that has accepted the ability of your ability to change your gender, and that children have the cognizance to decide for themselves what their gender is, right? So within the trans movement, you see elements of transhumanism. And that's why I've been more or less opposed to it. Is, it's not like I'm here, I want to oppress people's rights. Like, do whatever you want to do, as long as you don't, infringe on my rights, Godspeed. My issue is, once you surrender basic fundamentals of biology, so male, female, if we can't agree on that, right, we have no basis of foundation of science. Everything is incumbent on a feeling or an emotion, and it's very fluid, and you have no objective basis for reality. But then also, once you surrender the tenets of biology and the tenets of science, right, you can begin manipulating the human condition and the human form in ways that we haven't really permitted up until now. So, a decade ago, designer babies, kind of taboo. These days, you can choose certain characteristics, especially if you do IVF, you can choose certain characteristics of your offspring. And we're getting to a point where, that transgenderism, especially transgenderism with regard to children, has opened the doors towards more eugenicist ideas of choosing supreme or things that people think are supreme or add some sort of exceptional value to human embryos. You can change, eye color, maybe you can change intellect, all these sorts of things. So we're progressing in this direction, right? Longevity, all these things. And so that's why I think it's important, is we're losing our humanity, and we're ascending, we're trying to ascend past the limitations of science and biology. And that gets kind of, I think, what I said in the beginning with the folly of humanity. And I think that's a line we don't want to cross. And so I want to play a clip that's kind of gone viral, a couple minutes of this, in an interview Peter Thiel did with the New York Times. And it kind of talks about transhumanism. But I think this is important because I don't think that this is necessarily a response to rationalism. I think it's another example of a techno-religious movement that has emerged in Silicon Valley that is vying for prominence. And because the people who support it, like Elon Musk, for example, and there is overlap, right? Elon Musk was cited in the Rationalist article, and he's also a transhumanist. So there is overlap, right? But these people are using their financial resources and capital to shape outcomes. Elon Musk, again, a huge player in the 2024 election, right? And so you're seeing the ideas of the rationalists, and you're seeing the ideas of transhumanism. It's filtered down into politics, into culture, shape our worldviews, shape how we relate to one another, right? Like, if I critique transgenderism on the basis of transhumanism, I will immediately get canceled for that, right? Like, there are probably people in my family who would, shun me, and friends who would shun me for even espousing these kinds of ideas, right? So this is why this is important, because we've moved into a world where we can't have constructive discourse because people like this are shaping and polluting, the public view, and it's becoming quite distorted for political means. And I think this is part of a larger endgame for these people to get peasants like you and I into their camps and supporting them. So let's dive into this clip because I think it's rather important.
But the world of AI is clearly filled with people who, at the very least, seem to have a more utopian, transformative, whatever word you want to call it, view of the technology than you're expressing here, right? And you were mentioned earlier the idea that the modern world used to promise radical life extension and doesn't anymore. It seems very clear to me that a number of people deeply involved in artificial intelligence see it as a kind of mechanism for transhumanism, for transcendence of our mortal flesh, and either some kind of creation of a successor species or some kind of merger of mind and machine. And do you think that's just all kind of irrelevant fantasy? Or do you think it's just hype? Do you think people are trying to raise money by pretending that we're going to build a machine god, right? Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
in this.
Should
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But
So this clip went viral because of that exchange right there, and the fact that Peter Thiel hesitated. So with just a simple question: should the human race endure? And Peter Thiel is more of a libertarian. I would say more of a conservative. And he's been influential in J.D. Vance's life, for example, current vice president. And he's been more of like a contrarian thinker in Silicon Valley. And so the fact that someone who is of kind of on the right side, right, a political right, but not quite the Republican right per se, but someone who would even question that premise, like should the human race endure, kind of tells you like where these guys' minds are at. And Peter Thiel is significant because he has money. He has money to fund the ideas and the beliefs and the startups that, again, are transforming these ideas and then bringing them to life. So if he doesn't think that the human species should endure, he has the means to ensure that it doesn't. And so this is why understanding where these ideas come from and how it's not just, a bunch of VC bros having lunch together in Silicon Valley coming up with these great entrepreneurial ideas. I think that's what we think of when we think of Silicon Valley. And no, I think it's an incubator for a new era of philosophy and a new era of secular religions. And it's starting to meet with politics, which is what has made it so vitriolic. But these people believe certain things about existence and life itself, and they're going to create the things, the AI, the tools, the companies that give their vision of life meaning and life itself. And so I think that's it's worth noting and paying attention to.
But I also would I also would like us to radically solve these problems,
right.
And so it's always, I don't know. Transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses. And a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina, and we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul, and you need to transform your whole self. And so,
right. But the other wait.
So I can't speak to Orthodox Christianity. I don't know too much about their beliefs, but I will say from just an evangelical Christian perspective, I don't know that this is necessarily right. It's like you want to transform and transcend in a spiritual sense. You want to overcome the sin and vices of the world and your predilection for those things, I don't think it's actually like a literal transcendence. And I think this is where things kind of get confusing, is you have this abstract conversation around your mind and your spirit and your soul and your spirituality, and there's transcendence in that, versus what they were talking about before with transcendence of the limitations of biology and the physicality of your existence. And so I think these two things are becoming intertwined. And there are some transhumanists who, yes, believe the spiritual side of it, but then that is being translated into physical changes as well. So transgenderism, obviously the most easy example of that to articulate today, but tomorrow it could be something different where you get a more powerful heart. Think of it. I'm a runner, right? So there's controversies in running because there's all these new super shoes on the market, and they give you certain advantages, and some races they're banned. So imagine a world where you could get a fake heart and you could start running at Usain Bolt level speeds because you have a fake heart, right? Like, I think that's the kind of stuff he's talking about here, where you can really excel and push the limits. And so I think they're kind of two different things, and they're being conflated a bit here.
Generally agree with what I think is your belief, that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace, and the person who tries to do it.
So that is not true. The basis of Christianity is that you are restored. It's restoration of union with God. So it's not that you're a perfected body and perfected in your human form and in human flesh. It's return to union with God. And so evangelicals believe that comes through the atonement of sin through Christ's sacrifice and acceptance of that through salvation, and that is what will restore you with God. But again, this is why I think you have people who, to my knowledge, don't practice a religion and haven't studied the theology of Christianity, talking about it, and then trying to layer on the Enlightenment 2.0 interpretation of what Christianity is, what religion is, what spirituality is, but then applying a scientific, progressive, not political, but progressive in the linear, technological sense, lens to it.
On their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
Well, it's let's articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of Christianity, that says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so if you and there is a word in which, a sense in which, the way I understand the Judeo-Christian inspiration is it is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things, and
again, it's not about literally transcending nature. It's about transcending your human urges, your natural urges. So, gluttony is a sin in the Bible, right? So practicing discipline and not, being gluttonous. For example, I got chocolate chip cookies in my freezer that I've put away because I'm trying to be disciplined in how I eat. And man, I would love to go get one of those cookies right now. But, part of it is I have to overcome that desire to have that so I can have something better later on. And so that's again, as someone who grew up in an evangelical church, like, that was my understanding of this and transcending, the human condition or the limitations of it.
The closest thing you can say to nature is that people are fallen, and that's the natural thing in a Christian sense, is that you're messed up. And that's true. But, there's some ways that, with God's help, you are supposed to transcend that and overcome that. And
Right. But the
and
people,
if you just
present
say
company
you're
accepted, most of the people working to build the hypothetical machine god don't think that they're cooperating with Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts.
Sure, sure,
They think that they're
okay,
building
but
immortality
Ross,
on their own,
yeah,
right?
we're jumping around a lot of things. So
Yes.
again, the critique I was saying is they're not ambitious enough.
Right.
From a Christian point of view, these people are not ambitious enough. Now, then we get into this question: well, are they still?
But they're not morally and spiritually ambitious enough.
And are they still physically ambitious enough? And are they even still really transhumanists? And this is where, okay, the cryonics thing, that seems like a retro thing from 1999. There isn't that much of that going on. So they're not transhumanists on a physical body. And then, okay, well,
Right.
maybe it's not about cryonics. Maybe it's about uploading, which, okay, well, it's not quite. I'd rather have my body. I don't want just a computer program that simulates me. So that
I
uploading
agree.
seems like a step down from cryonics. But then even that's, it's part of the conversation, and this is where it gets very hard to score. And I don't want to say they're all making it up and it's all fake, but I don't
You think some of it's fake?
I don't think it's fake. Implies people are lying, but I want to say it's not the center of gravity.
Yeah.
And so there is a cornucopian language. There's an optimistic language. A conversation I had with Elon.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. There is a lot more to this if you want to. It's almost a 2-hour long interview. Really worth watching if you want to understand where Silicon Valley is at and what they're thinking about. But I think this is really important because it underscores kind of where these tech religions are going. And according to Peter Thiel, his critique is this isn't going far enough. So he wants to see more. He wants to see people actually be all in on the transhumanist agenda. And so I think this is that combined with the urgency aspect I talked about in the first piece. I think this is going to push people to push the limits and again dump money and resources and time faster into creating technologies that we don't quite fully understand the ramifications and the consequences of those technologies, but also these technologies put us into the position of being creator and reduces us, or not reduces, but changes our status from being created. And, if you believe in the Judeo-Christian tradition of how we got here and what our purpose in life is, I think that should send some alarm bells off to people. So I think this is kind of where we're going, where religion hasn't died. I think a lot of people point to, rise in agnosticism and atheism as like religion dying. I think religion has just taken a new secular form. And transhumanism and the rationalists are two examples of this. And they are shaping the future as we know it. And this is why I think you're seeing a bifurcation of society into, utopians / dystopians concerned about the future and reactionists who are hearkening back to traditional values and traditional norms because that feels safe, that feels stable, that feels something like you can connect with and understand with. So I think we're moving in those different directions, and of course, there's different branches you can take. With that, you got your trad wives who are super traditional. You got your homesteaders. You have, like I said, your dystopian folks, your utopian folks. So there's different aspects of these two vectors, but I think we're seeing a traditionalism versus futurism, and I think that is informing politics, it's informing culture, it's informing society, and it's it's trickling down and it's shaping our relationships with other people. So I think this is worth thinking about. Again, this is like my initial cursory dive into this, so my thoughts aren't fully fleshed out yet. I just wanted to cover these two pieces because I think they were salient and they were in the news recently, so it was worth covering. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you've thought of tech religions or secular religions, and if you've thought of some of these ideas or how you're approaching the technological evolution that's underway from a philosophical and spiritual perspective, I would love your take on it. Any books you've read as well, please share those in the or books or thinkers that you're following, share their books and authors and resources in the comments below. I'd love to check some of those out. Thanks for watching. And if you like this analysis, please subscribe and share with anyone in your network who might find this interesting as well. And I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.